It tells them that words, ideas, speakers can literally kill them. Even worse, at a time of rapidly rising political polarization in the United States, it helps a small subset of that generation justify political violence. Indeed, protesters all too often engage in physically violent disruption when they believe their identity group is under verbal attack by someone, usually conservative, but not always. Not only do some administrators look the other way, at Middlebury College, Cal State, LA.
Ben Shapiro just delivered a jaw-dropping testimony before Congress, exposing how the left is destroying free speech through identity politics and intimidation. From campus riots to the dangerous idea that speech is violence, Shapiro's words left lawmakers stunned. Watch as Illuminate breaks down his most powerful moments and why this speech is a defining stand for the First Amendment.
Mr. Shapiro.
It's an honor to testify. It's an honor to testify before you here today. The reason that I'm with you is that I speak on dozens of college campuses every year, so I have some firsthand experience with the anti-First Amendment activities that have been taking place on the college campuses. I've encountered anti-free speech measures, administrative cowardice, even physical violence at campuses ranging from California State University at Los Angeles to University of Wisconsin at Madison, which is driving the legislation that Ms. Demings was talking about, to Penn State University to UC Berkeley, and I am not alone. In order to understand what's been going on at some of our college campuses, it's necessary to explore the ideology that provides the impetus for a lot of the protesters who violently obstruct events, pull fire alarms, assault professors and even other students, and the impetus for administrators who all too often humor these protesters. Free speech is under assault because of a three-step argument made by the advocates and justifiers of violence. The first step is they say that the validity or invalidity of an argument can be judged solely by the ethnic, sexual, racial, or cultural identity of the person making the argument. The second step is that they claim those who say otherwise are engaging in what they call verbal violence. And the final step is they conclude that physical violence is sometimes justified in order to stop such verbal violence. So let's examine each of these three steps in turn. First, the philosophy of intersectionality. This philosophy now dominates college campuses as well as a large segment, unfortunately, of today's Democratic Party, and suggests that straight white Americans are inherently the beneficiaries of white privilege and therefore cannot speak on certain policies, since they have not experienced what it's like to be black or Hispanic or gay or transgender or a woman. This philosophy ranks the value of a view not based on the logic or merit of the view, but on the level of victimization in American society experienced by the person espousing the view. Therefore, if you're an LGBT black woman, your view of American society is automatically more valuable than that of a straight white male. The next step in the logic is obvious. If a straight white male, or anybody else who ranks lower on the victimhood scale, says something contrary to the viewpoint of the higher-ranking intersectionality identity, that person has engaged in a microaggression. As NYU social psychologist Jonathan Haidt writes, microaggressions are small actions or word choices that seem on their face to have no malicious intent, but that are thought of as a kind of violence nonetheless. You don't have to actively say anything insulting to microaggress. Somebody merely needs to take offense. If, for example, you say that society ought to be colorblind, you're microaggressing certain identity groups who have been victimized by a non-colorblind society. Note, microaggressions, as the name suggests, are not merely insults. They are aggressions. They are the equivalent to physical violence. Just 2 weeks ago, psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University published an essay in the New York Times suggesting that words should be seen as physical violence because they can cause stress, and stress causes physical harm. Thus, Feldman suggested it is reasonable, scientifically speaking, to ban or restrict speech you do not like at your school. This is both inane and dangerous. That's because it leads to the final logical step. Words you don't like deserve to be fought physically. When I spoke at California State University at LA, one professor threatened students who sponsored me by offering to fight them. He then posted a slogan on the door of his office stating, "The best response to microaggression is macroaggression." As Haidt writes, this is why the idea that speech is violence is so dangerous. It tells the members of a generation already beset by anxiety and depression that the world is a far more violent and threatening place than it really is. It tells them that words, ideas, speakers can literally kill them. Even worse, at a time of rapidly rising political polarization in the United States, it helps a small subset of that generation justify political violence. Indeed, protesters all too often engage in physically violent disruption when they believe their identity group is under verbal attack by someone, usually conservative, but not always. Not only do some administrators look the other way, at Middlebury College, Cal State, LA, Berkeley, Evergreen, actual crimes were committed and almost nobody has been arrested. But they actively forbid events from moving forward, creating a heckler's veto. The notion that if you are physically violent enough, you can get administrators to kowtow to you, to bow before you, by canceling an event you disagree with altogether. All of this destroys free speech. But just as importantly, it turns students into snowflakes, craven and pathetic, looking for an excuse to be offended so they can earn points in the Intersectionality Olympics and then use those points as a club with which to beat opponents. A healthy nation requires an emotionally and intellectually vigorous population ready to engage in open debate at all times. Shielding college students from opposing viewpoints makes them simultaneously weaker and more dangerous. We must fight that process at every step. And that begins by acknowledging that whatever we think about America and where we stand, we must agree on this fundamental principle. All of our views should be judged on their merits, not on the color or sex or sexual orientation of the speaker, and those views should never be banned on the grounds that they offend someone. Thanks so much.
Mr. Shapiro, you an agitator?
Not as far as I'm aware. So I think that some of what's been said does miniskirt the debate. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I got it right. When you were talking about the Wisconsin law, I believe that law was brought up in direct counter to what happened, and it was people talked about it on the floor of the legislature. In direct counter to what happened when I spoke at University of Wisconsin at Madison, where you had a bunch of protesters who stood in front of the stage and obstructed the stage, and then refused to leave. And when I asked the police would they remove the protesters they've been going for 15 minutes. By the way. Personally, two things, just to preface. I have no problem whatsoever with people protesting my speeches. I do have a problem with people who won't actually let me speak. And number two, as far as all the talk about white supremacy, I can speak from experience. Mr. Lawrence, your organization named me the #1 target of anti-Semitism online last year. So I have a trophy at my house that says #1 hated Jew in America. So I'm totally familiar with the level of vitriol that's become common in our politics. But one of the things that's a problem, and I think we have to be careful about, is when we say leave it to the administrators, and then the administrators do what they did at UW, which is the police. I said to the police, "Will you remove these protesters?" And the police said, "We have been told by the administration that if we remove the protesters, we are to shut down the event entirely. So we can't remove the protesters." We literally had to wait until they just got tired and walked out, basically. When that's the response of the administration, shouldn't there be some sort of repercussion for that? Because what I'm seeing is a heckler's veto that's taking place on campus. What I'm seeing is people who are not engaging in free speech designed to enrich the debate, but in order to shut down the debate. And there have to be some sort of ramifications for people who are actually committing trespass. I mean, this is not a question of free. Everyone is trying to focus in on this term hate crime and hate speech. But the important part of those phrases is not the first word. It's speech versus crime. So if there's a crime that's being committed, we're all in agreement. If somebody commits a crime and they're speaking of an imminent threat to somebody, of course that's a crime. But that has very little to do with the hate and a lot more to do with the crime as to whether that's prosecuted, because hate speech is not prosecutable, nor should it be policed by the campus. So the fact is that what we are seeing is a conflation between speech and active attempts to obstruct in order to promote the obstruction by some administrators on a few college campuses.
Can you speak to how time, manner, and place restrictions are being abused?
So most obviously, UC Berkeley did that with Ann Coulter, where they kept moving around her room and they kept saying they didn't have rooms available. They said the same thing to me a week ago. There was some public outcry, and now they're offering some rooms, which I hope that event goes forward. It's not rare. They do this a lot. A private university that did it was DePaul University. I was threatened with arrest if I set foot on campus. I actually showed up there, and a security guard told me, I asked him, if I move 6 inches forward, are you going to arrest me? And he said yes, and he had the sheriff of Cook County behind him. So this is, it's become a cover for ideological discrimination, because if Ta-Nehisi Coates wants to speak on these campuses, there's not going to be any problem. The administrators will make certain that time, place, and manner restrictions don't get in the way. And this is why I say, saying that the discretion of administrators is wonderful is all well and good, except that they very often are attempting to achieve a particular political end by using means that are normally legitimate, and that's definitely a dangerous thing. If you don't mind, I have a quick note on something that I think it was Mr. Lawrence was saying earlier about the damage that's done to students by various things that happen on campus, by threats of violence and this sort of thing. And obviously, everyone, I think, agrees that what happened to Taylor is unacceptable. But one of the things that I think should also be pointed out is we have a lot of other students in the crowd and administrators who spend an enormous amount of time pushing stuff like white privilege means that you must accept that you.
Welcome back to Illuminate, the channel that brings truth, reason, and unapologetic patriotism to light. If you're tired of the media spin and ready to stand for American values, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button to keep freedom alive in this fight for truth. Today, we're breaking down one of the most powerful and unapologetic speeches ever delivered before Congress, Ben Shapiro's takedown of the left's war on free speech. Ben walked into that hearing room not as a pundit, but as a patriot defending the First Amendment, and by the time he was done, the entire room was left speechless. He didn't mince words. Shapiro exposed how radical ideology is rotting our universities from the inside out. He laid out exactly how the far left's obsession with identity politics has turned once great institutions of learning into echo chambers of censorship and intolerance. Shapiro explained that the modern campus no longer values truth, it values victimhood. He revealed the left's three-step formula for silencing conservatives. First, they claim that only certain identities have the right to speak. Second, they label disagreement as verbal violence. And third, they justify real physical violence to shut down anyone who dares to challenge their narrative. He called out intersectionality, the twisted belief that your ideas matter less if you're white, male, or straight, as a poison to open debate. And he warned what happens when universities start teaching students that words are violence. You get mobs of so-called activists throwing punches and burning flags, all in the name of tolerance. Shapiro didn't just speak about ideas. He gave examples. From Berkeley to Madison to Cal State LA, he told stories of conservatives silenced, events canceled, police refusing to act because administrators feared offending the mob. And then came the knockout moment. Shapiro called out the hypocrisy head-on. He reminded the committee that hate speech is still free speech. He said what so many are afraid to say: the First Amendment doesn't protect feelings. It protects freedom. He even turned their own arguments back on them. When one member tried to twist white privilege into a moral justification for silencing dissent, Shapiro calmly dismantled it. He said, and I quote, "If you want to cite examples of racism, let's fight that together. But if you're telling people their opinion is worth less because of their skin color, that's not equality, that's bigotry." And that, folks, is why Ben Shapiro left that chamber in stunned silence. Because for once, someone had the courage to say what most politicians won't. Truth doesn't care about your feelings. He ended by honoring the young Americans who still believe in free speech, those handing out constitutions, not Molotov cocktails, and reminded everyone that a strong nation depends on strong minds willing to debate. You could feel the energy in that room shift. Lawmakers didn't know how to respond, because when logic meets emotion, truth wins every time. This wasn't just a testimony, it was a wake-up call to America. Freedom of speech is not negotiable. It's not hate to disagree. And it's not violence to speak truth. The day we allow words to be treated as crimes is the day liberty dies. So here's the challenge, patriots. Don't stay silent. Speak boldly. Stand for truth. Because in this battle for America's soul, silence is surrender. If you stand with free speech, hit like, subscribe, and share this video so others see what real courage looks like when it stands before Congress. This is Illuminate, where truth cuts through the darkness.